There comes a moment when the silence around you no longer feels like absence but arrival. The noise that once defined your worth, the approval, the affection, the endless search for connection, suddenly dissolves, and what remains is something both terrifying and sacred yourself. That stillness isn't emptiness, it's the first sound of your soul remembering its own voice. But here's the question that most people avoid when they chase love as if it were oxygen. What if staying single isn't a failure, but the initiation your soul has been waiting for? And what if the loneliness you fear is actually the doorway to your highest freedom? Carl Jung once wrote that the greatest privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Yet few ever reach that point because the world seduces us into partnership before we've even met ourselves. From childhood, we are fed the story that love is the final destination, that the purpose of life is to find the one. We internalize the script so deeply that we mistake attachment for meaning and belonging for selfhood. To stay single by choice, then, is not merely to resist romance. It is to step outside the collective hypnosis that equates solitude with lack. It is an act of defiance against the unconscious pact humanity has made with comfort over consciousness. You begin to sense how much of love, as society defines it, is simply fear wearing perfume. Fear of being unseen, fear of being unchosen, fear of facing the vast cathedral of your own interior life without an audience. Jung saw this fear as a symptom of what he called participation mystique, the primitive need to merge with others in order to feel real. The ego, still immature, seeks reflection, echo, confirmation. It cannot yet bear the silence of self-recognition. That is why so many relationships are not unions but fusions, two incomplete selves clinging to each other in the dark, mistaking warmth for wholeness. When you choose solitude consciously, you interrupt this pattern. You withdraw not out of bitterness, but out of devotion, to discover who you are when no one is mirroring you. It is a radical experiment in authenticity. The friends who once envied your independence may start to pity you. The world will call you lonely, selfish, unfulfilled. Let them. What they cannot see is that beneath the quiet exterior, an alchemical process has begun. Something within you is being burned clean. The psychic noise of compromise begins to fade. The inner voices that were once drowned out by external approval rise again, raw, uncertain, luminous. You start to meet the stranger living inside you, the one who has watched every performance, endured every adaptation, and waited patiently for this silence to begin. Freedom, you realize, is not given, it's reclaimed. And the first territory you must reclaim is yourself. The world teaches you early that to be loved is to be safe. But Jung would say that this lesson, though comforting, is the very seed of our discontent. From the moment you are praised for pleasing others, parents, teachers, lovers, you begin to trade authenticity for attachment. You learn to contort your natural essence to fit the fragile expectations of those who claim to love you. You become likable at the cost of being real. This conditioning is so subtle, so socially rewarded, that few ever question it. Society doesn't celebrate the solitary thinker, the wanderer, the soul in retreat. It celebrates the couple, the family, the image of togetherness as proof of success. Even spiritual circles often disguise dependency as devotion. Find your twin flame, they say, as though wholeness were something earned through someone else's presence. But Jung warned that the collective mind always resists individuation because an individuated person is dangerous, uncontrollable, unpredictable, no longer governed by social approval. To stay single, then, is not merely a romantic decision, it is a psychological rebellion. You are withdrawing from the collective trance that says your value is measured by your relational status. You are daring to discover your own rhythm in a world addicted to synchronization. Look closely at how this conditioning operates. Think of the subtle guilt that arises when you spend too much time alone. The creeping thought that something must be wrong with you if no one is choosing you. That guilt is not yours. It is inherited. It's the echo of centuries that taught especially sensitive souls that solitude equals exile. But exile, Jung would say, is the beginning of self-initiation. Every prophet, artist, and visionary has walked through that desert before returning with fire in their eyes. There is a reason why the moment you stop seeking validation, people start to feel uneasy around you. You are no longer participating in the silent social contract of mutual dependency. You have stepped outside the economy of attention that fuels most relationships. When you no longer need to be liked, you become unpredictable because your motives are no longer transactional. Jung understood this as the transcendent function, the ability to hold tension between opposites, belonging and independence, intimacy and solitude, without collapsing into either. The single person who masters this art becomes what he called individuated, a self whose worth is intrinsic, not relational. You might feel this tension as both ache and liberation. Some evenings, the quiet hums with peace. Others, it roars with absence. On those nights, you begin to see how deeply you have been conditioned to equate stillness with loneliness. You might scroll through photos of couples, families, smiling faces, and feel a pang that says, "Why not me?" But if you look deeper, beneath the envy, you'll find a different voice speaking. Because you are not meant to replicate, you are meant to remember. To remember that your soul did not come here to be chosen, it came here to awaken. An awakening rarely happens in company. It requires the friction of solitude, the crucible of silence, the courage to see where you have built your identity on borrowed dreams. The longer you remain single by choice, the clearer your inner landscape becomes. The fog of performance lifts. You begin to notice how much of your personality was actually camouflage, a collection of gestures designed to secure affection. Without anyone to perform for, your psyche relaxes into its natural form. The person you meet in that stillness might shock you. You will find both the divine and the broken, the visionary and the child, the one who longs and the one who fears. All of them are you. This is what Jung meant by meeting the shadow. The parts you once disowned now step forward, not as enemies but as teachers. They do not ask you to be perfect, they ask you to be whole. At first, the silence feels unbearable. You may fill it with music, messages, memories, anything to avoid the echo of your own thoughts. But slowly, something shifts. The noise loses its power to distract. You start listening to the silence itself, and within it, you begin to hear an ancient rhythm pulsing beneath the surface of your consciousness. Jung called this the voice of the self, not the ego, not the personality, but the deep intelligence that has been guiding you all along. It speaks not in words, but in sensations. The sudden weight of calm in your chest when you make the right decision. The subtle unrest that arises when you betray your own nature. The longer you remain unattached to external noise, the more fluent you become in this inner language. This is the true purpose of solitude, not to escape the world, but to remember the world inside you. Jung described this stage as the night sea journey, a descent into the unconscious where old identities dissolve. When you stop performing for love, all the versions of you that existed only to please others begin to die. The caretaker, the pleaser, the rescuer, the idealist all slowly sink back into the depths. It can feel like grief, because it is. You are mourning the self that once secured you belonging. But this death is sacred. It is the funeral of imitation, the end of the false self. Many mistake this phase for depression, but Jung saw it as the necessary darkness before rebirth. The psyche, he said, cannot renew itself without dissent. You might feel lost, disoriented, or stripped of meaning. Old desires crumble, old pleasures fade. You are not broken. You are being emptied, prepared to hold something truer. The single life, when embraced consciously, becomes a spiritual crucible. It burns away everything that cannot stand alone. In this furnace of solitude, alchemy begins. The same energy that once sought others for completion now turns inward, fueling transformation. Your emotions, once reactive, become raw material. Loneliness becomes depth. Desire becomes focus. Pain becomes clarity. Every unmet need reveals a forgotten capacity within you. The love you long to receive becomes the love you learn to generate. You begin to realize that self-love is not a slogan but a discipline, a consistent act of returning to your own center when the world offers 1,000 exits. Jung often warned that the modern individual's greatest danger is the loss of connection to their inner life. The crowd, the media, the constant connectivity all pull the psyche outward. Solitude is the antidote, the reorientation toward inner authority. When you sit alone long enough, you start to sense how every answer you ever chased in another person was always encoded within you. The right partner, the right purpose, the right path. They all emerge naturally when the relationship with the self is restored. There comes a day when you look around your quiet apartment and realize it no longer feels empty, it feels sacred. The same walls that once echoed with absence now hum with presence. You move through your space slowly, consciously, as if tending to a temple. Every object, every breath, every moment becomes part of a quiet ritual of becoming. You begin to sense that solitude isn't something you endure, it's something you cultivate. And this cultivation births a strange new emotion: peace. Not the fleeting calm that comes after distraction, but the steady stillness of being at home in your own company. The world might still whisper that you're incomplete, but the whisper no longer lands. You've discovered something rarer than love, self sufficiency of the soul. But there's a paradox here. One Jung understood intimately: the moment you no longer need connection, genuine connection becomes possible. When you stop reaching for others to fill your void, you finally meet them from fullness rather than hunger. Solitude, it turns out, is not the absence of love, it's its preparation. The silence that once frightened you has become your teacher, and the more you listen, the more it reveals that the very loneliness you tried to escape was never punishment. It was the universe's most compassionate way of returning you to yourself. There comes a quiet evening when you realize you no longer crave the noise of company, only the authenticity of presence. Not the presence of others, but of truth. It's a subtle but irreversible shift. You stop asking, "Who will stay with me?" and begin to ask, "Who am I when I am alone?" That question is not born of loneliness, it is born of awakening. Jung believed that until a person becomes inwardly reconciled with solitude, they cannot truly love another. Why? Because most relationships are built not on genuine connection, but on unconscious need. The ego, terrified of emptiness, grasps for another body, another voice, another life to echo its existence. It calls this attachment love, but Jung saw through the illusion. He called it projection, the act of casting our disowned parts onto someone else and mistaking their reflection for completion. Think about it. How often have you fallen in love with what you wished you were? The confident one, the calm one, the passionate one. You weren't loving a person, you were loving an archetype, your own unclaimed energy dressed in another's skin. And when they failed to sustain that illusion, pain followed, not because love vanished, but because the mirror cracked. Staying single exposes these patterns with brutal clarity. There is no one left to carry your projections, no one to distract you from your own shadow. The traits you admired or despised in others begin to reveal themselves as your own, unintegrated fragments. This is the heart of individuation, the retrieval of what was exiled. The more of yourself you reclaim, the less you need to find it elsewhere. This is why Jung said that solitude is not isolation, it is integration. It's the moment the psyche withdraws its projections and gathers its scattered energies back into the self. It's when you finally stop asking others to save you from yourself. You start to see love differently, not as a transaction, but as resonance between two whole beings. Yet this stage can feel disorienting. Without someone to project upon, your inner world becomes a mirror hall. You might meet parts of yourself you once abandoned: your anger, your jealousy, your tenderness, your yearning. They rise like forgotten children, demanding recognition. It can be overwhelming, but it's sacred work. Jung warned that the greatest danger lies in repressing these energies, for what is repressed doesn't disappear, it returns disguised as fate. So you begin to practice radical honesty. You name what you feel without judgment. You stop dividing yourself into good and bad, spiritual and human. You learn to hold contradictions, to be wise and foolish, disciplined and soft, fierce and kind. The boundaries between opposites dissolve into a deeper unity. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to create wholeness through tension. In this wholeness, you start to perceive a different kind of love, one that doesn't depend on possession or permanence. It's quieter, slower, freer. You feel it when you care for a plant, when you write in silence, when you walk under the night sky, aware that everything you need already lives within you. This love has no object, it simply radiates. And yet, paradoxically, this inner completeness doesn't make you immune to desire. It makes you capable of conscious desire. You can now long for someone without losing yourself in them. You can choose intimacy without abandoning your solitude. You can give without expectation because you no longer need to extract meaning from another's approval. Most people never reach this maturity because they mistake comfort for connection. They cling to relationships that keep them asleep. But the individuated person would rather face the wilderness of truth than the warmth of illusion. They understand what Jung meant when he said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." Love then becomes not fusion but combustion, not merging into sameness, but expanding into mutual transformation. You begin to see that true partnership is not found by searching, it's revealed when two complete souls recognize each other's freedom and choose to walk together without cages. But before that recognition can happen, solitude must finish its work. It must strip away the final illusion that someone else will complete you, for only when you no longer need to be completed can love truly find you. The moment you stop needing others to validate your worth, the world grows uneasy. Society doesn't know what to do with a person who no longer depends on it for identity. You can feel it in the subtle shifts of conversation, the puzzled glances when you say you're happy alone, the half teasing comments about still being single, the gentle concern that sounds like pity, but beneath their smiles lies discomfort because your autonomy confronts their own dependency. Carl Jung saw this tension as inevitable. The individuated person, he said, is always a threat to the collective order, not because they are rebellious, but because they expose the unconscious compromises on which society is built. The one who has learned to stand alone reminds everyone else of how much they've settled for approval, for convenience, for belonging. Freedom, when embodied, reveals captivity in others. You might notice that people try to fix your solitude. They project their unease onto you, urging you to find someone, to open up, to stop being so picky. But their advice is rarely about your happiness, it's about restoring their comfort. They need your life to mirror theirs so that their own choices remain unquestioned. Jung would call this the shadow of the collective, the unconscious fear that someone who transcends the herd will expose its illusions. In truth, staying single is not a rejection of love, it's a refusal to worship dependency. You've simply outgrown the need to belong at the cost of yourself. Yet this independence can make you appear cold, detached, even arrogant to those still entangled in emotional fusion. But solitude doesn't harden you, it clarifies you. It refines the difference between connection and attachment, between empathy and entanglement. The individuated person no longer plays the social performance of constant availability. Their no becomes sacred. They choose their company the way an artist chooses color, with intention. Their energy is no longer scattered trying to please. It is concentrated, radiant, precise. People sense this immediately. Some are drawn to it, others retreat, feeling judged by a light that simply illuminates what they've avoided seeing. Jung understood that solitude changes your psychic frequency. When you no longer vibrate with collective dependency, you become almost invisible to those who still need it. Friendships may fade, conversations lose depth, invitations decline. This thinning of social ties is not punishment, it's purification. Your field must clear before new connections aligned with your truth can appear. There's a strange peace in this invisibility. You begin to realize that you were never meant to be understood by everyone. The purpose of individuation is not popularity, it's authenticity. Jung wrote that the self-realized individual becomes an exception to the rule, and the rule always resists exceptions. But it is precisely through such exceptions that humanity evolves. Still, there are moments when the solitude bites, holidays, empty rooms, the quiet after a long day. You may wonder if the price of freedom is too high. Yet if you listen closely, beneath the ache there is dignity. You are learning what Jung called holding the tension of opposites, the ability to feel both longing and fulfillment at once, to contain your humanity without collapsing into need. Freedom, after all, isn't comfortable, it's costly. It requires the courage to face the emptiness others avoid. It demands that you generate meaning without witnesses, that you become the source of your own light. But once you've tasted that inner authority, you cannot return to the smallness of being defined by someone else's gaze. The world will keep offering you substitutes, temporary warmth, collective distraction, 1,000 ways to forget yourself. But you've already seen behind the curtain. You know that most people don't seek love, they seek relief from their own silence, and you can no longer pretend that noise equals life. So you keep walking the solitary path, not as exile, but as explorer. You understand what Jung meant when he said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. You begin to sense that this privilege is earned only in solitude, because only when you've met yourself completely can you meet the world without fear. You are not antisocial. You are becoming sovereign, and sovereignty is the rarest form of love there is. There comes a point in your solitude when something begins to bloom, not in spite of your aloneness, but because of it.
The silence that once felt heavy now moves like oxygen through your veins. You start waking with ideas that feel ancient and new at once. Symbols, images, intuitions rise from nowhere. Jung would call this the voice of the unconscious finally being heard after years of suppression. For most people, creativity is a performance. It seeks applause, recognition, validation. But when you've lived long enough without the constant gaze of others, expression becomes something different. It becomes communion. You are no longer creating to be seen. You are creating to listen. Each idea, each vision, each word becomes a conversation between your conscious self and the greater intelligence moving through you. Jung believed that solitude opens a psychic channel through which the archetypal world can communicate. He saw the artist, the mystic, the philosopher as midwives of the collective unconscious, individuals whose isolation allows the eternal to take form through their human vessel. This is why solitude has always been the birthplace of transformation. In silence, the barriers between personal and universal dissolve. You begin to sense that what moves within you is not merely yours, it belongs to life itself. Many of the world's great minds understood this. Einstein spoke of the holy curiosity born of solitude. Tesla called isolation indispensable for invention. Jung himself built his retreat at Bollingen Tower, where he spent months alone carving stones and communing with his dreams. They all knew that creativity doesn't emerge from noise. It emerges from stillness, from the vast, unmeasured spaces of the inner world. The single life, when lived consciously, becomes a form of devotion to that inner world. You start noticing patterns that others miss, the way the wind carries memory, the way light speaks across the floor, the way silence bends time. Your perception sharpens because your energy is no longer diffused in constant negotiation. Without the endless emotional transactions of daily entanglement, the psyche has room to breathe, and in that breath, the soul begins to paint. What's extraordinary is that this flowering of creativity doesn't make you detached from the world. On the contrary, it roots you more deeply in it. You become attuned to rhythms beyond language, the heartbeat of existence itself. Jung called this participation with the self, a state in which personal purpose aligns with universal process. You are no longer chasing meaning, you are being used by it. This is the paradox of true solitude. It looks like withdrawal, but it's actually participation in its purest form. When you are no longer distracted by the noise of social identity, you can finally feel life moving through you unfiltered. Every creative act becomes prayer. Every quiet observation becomes revelation. You begin to understand that separation was never real. It was simply a necessary illusion to bring you home to unity. And yet, as this inner life deepens, you may feel an odd grief for the person you once were, the one who measured worth by company, who mistook attention for affection. You look back at them with compassion, not shame. They were doing what everyone does, searching for reflection. You just happened to follow that search to its end, and found reflection not in another's eyes, but in the mirror of the self. From this mirror arises a calm joy. It doesn't shout or demand to be shared. It simply exists. You may still walk through crowds, laugh with friends, touch the pulse of ordinary life, but beneath it all runs a silent current that whispers, I am whole. It's not arrogance, it's remembrance. You've reconnected to what Jung called the numinous, that felt sense of the sacred that arises when ego bows before the self. Once this connection awakens, everything ordinary begins to glow. Even loneliness becomes luminous because it points you toward the divine within your own depths. This is the secret no one tells you about staying single. It's not just a lifestyle, it's initiation into creative consciousness. You become both artist and artwork, sculptor and clay. The world looks at you and wonders how you can live without partnership, unaware that you are in relationship every moment with life itself. And when people ask if you ever get lonely, you smile gently because you know what they don't. That loneliness, when understood, is simply the shadow of divine companionship. Eventually, the journey turns. You wake one morning and realize the ache you once called loneliness has transformed into space. Vast, open, clear. You are no longer searching for someone to share it with. You are tending it like a sacred garden. This is the moment Jung described as psychological integration, when the inner masculine and feminine, animus and anima, begin to dance in harmony. The war between need and independence ends, replaced by a deeper intimacy within yourself. You start to feel whole in a way that no relationship ever provided. Your inner polarities no longer fight for dominance, they collaborate.
The part of you that longs for tenderness finally meets the part of you that protects it. The part that dreams is embraced by the one that grounds. The union you once sought externally now blooms inside. This is what Jung meant by the sacred marriage, the alchemical wedding of opposites that produces a new level of consciousness. From this wholeness, love takes on a different shape. You stop asking, "Who will complete me?" and start asking, "Whom can I meet as an equal?" Love is no longer a remedy for pain, but a recognition of shared sovereignty. You no longer fall into relationships. You enter them consciously, with eyes open and boundaries intact. If you choose to merge, it's not from emptiness, but abundance. You no longer offer your soul as proof of devotion. You offer your truth as invitation. Jung believed that true partnership can only exist between two individuated beings, people who have faced their shadows, reclaimed their projections, and found their own center. Anything less is dependency disguised as love. Two halves cannot make a whole. They can only make an illusion. But two wholes can create a new world. That's the sacred paradox. When you no longer need love to heal you, love becomes capable of healing the world through you. It's around this time that the questions from the beginning return. What if staying single isn't failure, but initiation? And what if loneliness is the doorway to your highest freedom? You realize now that they were never theoretical questions, they were prophecies. Staying single was never about rejecting connection, it was about becoming the kind of person who could hold it without losing themselves. Loneliness was not a punishment, it was a purification. It stripped away every false story until only truth remained. Now, when someone enters your life, you don't rush to define it, label it, or make it permanent. You let it unfold like a conversation between souls. You understand that love doesn't have to promise forever to be real. It only has to be present, awake, and kind. You can walk beside someone without chaining them to your fears. You can let them leave without collapsing into emptiness, because emptiness no longer terrifies you. It has become the home of your wholeness. This is the quiet power of a self-realized being. To love without clinging, to give without depletion, to stay without possession. You become the embodiment of what Jung called the self in relation, a person who meets others not from need, but from fullness. The world might still not understand, it will still romanticize attachment and call it devotion. But you see through it now. You know that the purpose of love was never to complete you, it was to mirror the completeness you had forgotten. When that remembering happens, every interaction becomes sacred. Even a fleeting connection can awaken eternity. And so, paradoxically, by embracing singleness, you have prepared yourself for the most authentic love imaginable. A love that does not demand, does not imprison, does not dilute, a love that breathes. It may come in the form of another person, or it may simply manifest as a profound reverence for life itself. Either way, it will not rescue you because you no longer need to be saved. It will meet you at the level of your wholeness, and from that meeting, something timeless will emerge. This is the freedom you feared and the destiny you were always meant to reach. It happens quietly, no revelation, no applause, no cosmic sign, just rain. You watch it fall through the window, slow and relentless, tracing silver rivers down the glass. For years, you searched for meaning in lightning, something dramatic enough to rewrite your story. But Jung was right. Transformation rarely announces itself. It comes disguised as stillness. You sit in that stillness now, no longer restless, no longer waiting. The old ache, the hunger for proof, the need to be chosen, has softened into something gentler, belonging without possession. You realize that all the love you once begged the world to give you has been gathering inside you, quietly, patiently, waiting for your attention. The rain becomes a mirror. Each drop reflects a different version of who you've been: the lover who gave too much, the dreamer who mistook fantasy for fate, the child who equated affection with safety. You don't reject them anymore. You watch them dissolve into the water, merging with the sound of the world forgiving itself. Jung would say this is the completion of the individuation cycle, the reconciliation between who you were and who you have become. You step outside, the air smells of earth and surrender. The rain doesn't feel cold, it feels alive. You walk slowly, without destination, and something extraordinary happens. The silence that once haunted you now walks beside you like an old friend. You realize that solitude was never about separation. It was about intimacy with life itself. Every drop of rain, every breath of wind, every beat of your heart feels like conversation. This is what it means to have passed through the initiation of aloneness. You no longer carry your solitude as armor. You wear it as a second skin. It doesn't isolate you, it connects you. You understand now that love isn't the opposite of solitude, it's its highest expression. Love is what happens when solitude stops being afraid of itself. The questions you asked at the beginning echo one last time. What if staying single isn't failure, but initiation? What if loneliness is the doorway to your highest freedom? Now you know, it always was. Staying single was never about absence, it was about presence. It was the path through which your soul learned to breathe on its own, to generate its own light, to love without condition. You no longer measure your worth by whether someone else chooses you. You measure it by how deeply you choose yourself. Every day, in every silence, in every small act of tenderness toward your own existence. You have become both the seeker and the sought, the lover and the beloved. The rain begins to slow. The air hums with the promise of renewal. Somewhere deep within, a quiet knowing takes root. You are no longer searching for home. You are home. And when love finally arrives, not as rescue, but as reflection, it will not complete you, it will recognize you. Two solitudes meeting, not to escape their aloneness, but to celebrate it. Two souls, whole unto themselves, choosing to walk together through the mystery, without cages, without fear, without need. That is the love that waits beyond the noise. That is the life that begins where dependency ends. That is the gift of staying single, not isolation, but initiation into the rarest freedom of all, to belong entirely to yourself, and in doing so, to everything. If these words found you, it's not by chance. It's because something within you is remembering. The silence isn't punishment, it's your passage. Stay with it, let it shape you. And when you're ready, love will find you where you've already arrived, home within yourself.